Here at Be Freaking Awesome, we believe that life is too short to be anything less than extraordinary. Join us as we explore what it means to live authentically, grow continuously, and have a blast while doing it. Let's get started. Welcome, everyone, to this week's episode of Be Freaking Awesome. I am one of your hosts, Sammy Kinnison, here with Angela Belford, who's already laughing at me today. If you're watching the YouTube, don't know why she's laughing, but that's okay. We are joined today by one of our Podfest friends, Deborah, who also has a podcast that is pretty niche. And, I don't know that there's tons of overlap between our audience and your audience, Deborah, but maybe there are people out there with a deep love of goats that also want to live freaking awesome lives. And I think what are you trying to say, Angela? You muted, so I can't hear you laughing or talking or anything.
I thought I'd already unmuted because I couldn't see the thing. But no, it's not just about like shared audience. The idea is that I love that there may be people when we talk about how to be freaking awesome, then some of that is like, I have some ideas on how I might spend my time, how I might create joy, how I might create money to fund my joy. And so I think Deborah is an excellent example of like, here's a really cool and interesting way that she found something interesting, and she now funds her lifestyle and her joy with this, and it could also be a hobby. So anyway,
before we even let her talk for a moment, I want to debate the point. I wasn't trying to say that like we need to have a shared audience. I was just trying to say you may not have heard about Deborah, because I imagine that people who are listening to our audience may not be goat homesteaders and things like that, but I don't know. Maybe you guys are. Maybe we should do some more demographic research. I'm gonna stop talking now. Deborah, why don't you introduce yourself to everybody so that you can have a chance? Jesus, what an episode, guys. We're already starting strong.
Yeah, this is fun. So we moved to the country in 2002 because we wanted to start growing our own food organically. And at that time, everybody said, "Did you grow up in the country?" And I said, "No, but people have been growing their own food since the dawn of agriculture. So how hard can it be, right?" And
where did you move from?
The Chicago suburbs.
Okay.
Yeah, so we moved from the Chicago suburbs. It was me and my husband and 3 children, ages 9, 12, and 14. Our livestock experience consisted of 2 cats and a poodle. And we wanted to eat organically, and that wasn't that easy in 2002. Like, you had to go to a health food store, you had to pay premium prices. And then I started to learn about like the darker side of all that and how people would kind of twist the rules a little. Like, I found out that our cage-free eggs didn't mean they were outside. It just meant they weren't in cages, but they were still in big buildings. And I felt really betrayed and upset. And so I thought, okay, the only way we're really going to know what we're eating is if we grow it ourselves. And so we're just going to have to move to the country and do this. So we bought 32 acres in the middle of nowhere. Like, that's what everybody said when they saw it. They're like, "Oh my gosh, you're in the middle of nowhere." And I would say middle of nowhere and an hour from everywhere, because there was like an hour to different cities in different directions. And we really didn't know anything. Like, we had a garden a couple times, and we finally got to the point with that where, we could have salad and some spaghetti sauce and stuff and salsa, but we still didn't really know what we were doing. And we really did not know what we were doing with livestock. Like, I thought it was going to be super easy. And honestly, the chickens were. I always tell people, like, hey, if you can take care of a cat, you can handle chickens. Goats, however, were another story entirely. And like, we could not keep them alive. And vets couldn't help me. And that's how I accidentally became a goat expert.
I love that. And I love that it was just something that there wasn't a big grand plan necessarily. There was just following sort of an instinct and a pull towards doing something, and we'll figure it out along the way. I want to know more about, I'm curious, what prompted the like, no, we really need to go eat organic, and like sort of that commitment to even just that food practice. Is there more driving force behind that?
Oh yeah, definitely. So When I grew up, I was sick all the time. And, I would hear from my mother and my doctor that I was just a sickly child.
Mm.
And I had no idea that there was any connection whatsoever between your diet and your health. And when I got pregnant the first time and took a childbirth education class, one of the things they had us do was to start writing down everything we ate and looking at what was in ingredients. And I went home and I looked at my box of blueberry muffin mix and was really angry that there were no blueberries in it. Like, I thought I
Mm.
was doing a good thing. And it's like, no, there was just like stuff. There were these multisyllabic things that I did not recognize. Um, and that created fake blueberries that they're just little blue bits in there with artificial blueberry flavor. And so it sounds so silly, but like I started cooking from scratch, like blueberry muffins from scratch with real
Yeah.
blueberries and baking bread from scratch because that just totally opened my eyes to that. And then our children were not sick all the time like I was as a child. In fact, they were almost never sick. And so then I really started to see like, oh my gosh, this diet thing is like legit.
Mhm.
If you eat well, you're not going to be sick all the time like I was as a child because I grew up eating fast food, hamburgers, burritos, canned ravioli, frozen pizza. My mother had actually grown up on a farm and hated it. They moved to town when I was 3 years old. So I never knew what farm life was like. But my mother was of the opinion that only people who were not smart enough to get an office job stayed on the farm and that modern science
Mm.
was freeing her from the drudgeries of the kitchen. And she embraced it all fully.
Wow. Very interesting. And I think that, Angela, I know you've got a lot of thoughts about our food systems and the things that we're putting in our body.
What? Me? No, you're kidding. I've only launched a whole second podcast called Dare to Age Well Now to talk a lot about how all of this stuff is interrelated. So I am probably not a purist. I'm not yet at the stage of like getting more into the organic. Um, I'm sort of a crawl, walk, run girl. So, like, my first step for me is several years ago, really tuning into how much sugar, white sugar, high fructose corn syrup, that sort of thing. Started really reading the labels. So, started eating a lot more clean that way. And then really cut carbs was kind of, I would say, my next walk phase, and especially garbage carbs, whether that's just white pasta, white bread, just sitting and eating 3 rolls at dinner. Gosh, that was fun. Oh, I missed that. Um, and I think this next phase is where I'm doing more. I'm eating, I don't know. Lots of people that are around me every day would say, there's no way you do not eat whole foods. I do eat a lot of salads now, but I'm the queen of protein bars and protein shakes. I have been selective about which ones I choose to eat and get those as clean as I can. But I'm not real good on the organic side. And that's probably the next phase that I need to get to.
What's funny, Angela, about the bread and the carbs thing is that our families were doing dinner recently and we were in charge of bringing bread. And my husband, Chris, was like, oh, he was like, but your mom's not going to eat any bread. So we need to dial it back on how much we're getting and whatnot. And I was like, yes, but what if I homemade some rolls? Because if I did homemade rolls, then my mom would eat them. And that was like a whole thing that I was like, I know that if I make bread from scratch, she's going to be like, well, number one, it's just going to be better ingredients, better made, less preservatives.
Mm-hmm.
And I also know that if you're like, ooh, if I'm going to spend my carbs in a particular way, homemade bread is a way that I'm going to spend my carbs.
Yeah, and I would say also that I will do weird things like if I do get like a hamburger that has a bun, and I like it when it's a real actual like a ciabatta roll or a something, and I will still take the bread off. I will eat the hamburger and then go, I still hungry? And then I sit and just enjoy the bread and will just eat the bread. And I think that I would say more of my food journey relates to just being super intentional about how I think about food and enjoying it And I've even recently tweaked a couple of things that I'm not even talking about yet because everybody's going to think I'm an absolute lunatic. If you
We're
listen to
here.
podcasts, you know that I'm a lunatic. But I literally, I've started saying, like, because I don't eat a lot of bread, I was noticing a thought pattern where I would be like, oh my gosh, okay, you're going to eat this bread, but then it's okay, you're just going to have to survive on the scale. And then recently I started being like, whatever, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if you eat bread or you don't eat bread. Like, it's not going to matter. It's not going to show up. I'm like losing weight again. So funny how much mental energy goes into this. Anyway, but again, like we're talking a couple pounds here and there. Back to you, Deborah. Golly, where are we off on tangents today?
No, but I love it because I think that what I want to highlight and draw out. All right, I'm going to lean into our fourth person here in the room, the audience. What I just want to make sure that everybody's hearing is that your food journey can be different. And I would say that all three of us wholeheartedly agree that being intentional with your food choices matters. And if that is, I'm going to go cold turkey and we're growing everything and raising everything and that's all we're doing, then go for it. And if it's, I need to start with one thing first, and that's what I have capacity for, is paying attention to just my, artificial sugar intake, or just whatever, just organic produce. I'm going to make that switch and buy organic produce from the store instead of non-organic produce. I still think that that intentional choice is going to serve you well. And even if it's then, Deborah, it sounds like where you were making some of those intentional choices and then it was like, wait a minute, this isn't as good as I thought it was. I think it's okay for us to have that journey sometimes. And there's not necessarily, I wouldn't say there's a lot of shame of being like, well, because you're not growing everything that your family eats, you're not, doing enough as far as being intentional with your food. We're allowed to follow the baby steps.
Yeah, and we actually don't grow all of our food anymore. I mean, and it was never 100% because like I wasn't growing, wheat for make bread and stuff. But we actually don't grow as much as we used to because I really did go into it thinking that we were going to try to do 100%. And I mean, like, not only did so we had like sheep, goats, cows. We even had like, the sheep and the llamas for fiber. We had chickens, turkeys, ducks, geese. Like we had
Wow.
everything. We planted fruit trees. We had the garden. And as our kids started growing up and leaving home, I started to realize that like I couldn't keep up with it. Because people would always say, but that's a lot of work. And I'm like, yeah, but there's 5 of us, and each of us does about 45 minutes to an hour in the morning and the evening for chores, and that's it. And the rest of our day is free. Well, do the math on that, okay?
Yeah.
That adds up to like 7 to 10 hours a day. And so
Right.
as each child left home, and my husband worked full time teaching college, that meant I was doing more and more and more until it was literally a full-time job. And
Right.
one of my huge fears one day was like, oh my God, the cows are going to get out when nobody's home except me. And I knew, like, we had been lucky. Anytime the cows had gotten out, there'd been always at least 2 or 3 people home. And with 2 people, we barely got them back. If we had 4 or 5 people, that was ideal to try and get them back. But I was like, I don't want to be on the 6 o'clock news, as the owner of these cows that are like on the interstate that just caused a pile up. And so we got rid of the cows. But by then I was like into the good food community locally, and I knew a farmer who raised cows. And I felt really good getting my beef from him because like I had been to his farm. I knew his cows lived outside. I knew how they were being treated, what they were being fed, all that kind of stuff. So I think, even like finding a local farmer or going to your farmer's market. Like I go to the farmer's market now as a shopper. Because during COVID, our slaughterhouses got backed up and it was like a 1.5 year wait. And
wow.
at that point I was like, okay, we cannot continue to raise pigs because I can't have like 20 piglets sitting here with no idea when they're going to get processed. Like that would cost us a fortune to continue feeding them until it was time to process. So we ultimately just processed all of them. And so now I buy pork from local farmers at the farmers market. I go to the farmers market and get my pork there.
I love that. This is reminding me, there's a Portlandia
Yes,
episode
I
that
was
is
so.
really funny, that they go to the restaurant and they're like, "Oh, we're gonna have chicken," and they bring out these folders and they say, "Here's the chicken you're gonna eat today." Their name was
Charlie.
like, yeah, this is Charlie, this was Sally. Here's the pictures. They were best friends with these people, and they're like, okay, and they're asking more questions to be like, what kinds of things were the chickens interested in? They're like, all right, well, we're gonna take a moment. We're actually going to go drive to the farm real fast and go double check, save our table. We'll be right back. And then the episode is them going to the farm to make sure that all the things are. Anyway, it's very humorous take of like, no, I want to know where my food comes from. That they leave the restaurant to go check out where the food came from. But I think it's lovely. You knew, you had the folder. You could
What I
see
love is that every stereotype or every joke is because it's real life, and they just took it to the crazy extreme. Because you probably visited the farmer, you probably got to know the farmers hanging out at the farmers market when you were selling stuff, and so of course you're just buddies with everybody. Anyway, but I was
So,
totally thinking of that same episode.
so what livestock do you have now?
Now we only have sheep and goats and
Mhm.
chickens and turkeys. So
Okay.
that's it.
That's it. Just those four. So then, but something unique happened, I think, particularly with the goats, that like, tell us a little bit more about that and sort of what led to your podcast and then courses and everything else. And how
Wait a
did that
second.
go?
Can I just like pause for a second in the middle of the story, because we did not set up how we got to be friends with Deborah. Deborah and I both have a love of the color purple, and we're at this festival or this conference thing, and I'm like, "Oh, I love your outfit. What's your podcast about? Goats." I am obsessed. I thought it was so fantastic that somebody could have a whole podcast that is just dedicated to goats. So yes, now please tell us how that came to be.
Well, we got goats, and the first 2 or 3 years was absolutely blissful. It was easy. There was no problem. But each year things got like a little bit more challenging. Like, I guess I should say the first year was absolutely perfect. The second year, one of the three goats did not get pregnant. And the vet didn't know why, and he gave her a hormone injection. She still didn't get pregnant. We got more goats. More goats did not get pregnant. So we had this problem with infertility with the goats, and they were dying. Like, all of the male goats we had would die before they were 3 years old for the first 5 years. And literally nobody knew why. And I even was taking some of them to like the University of Illinois Vet Hospital. And ultimately what I wound up doing was, because I was at Illinois State University at the time and I had access to their scholarly database. I started searching the research and trying to find the answer to this. And I found a study published by a professor from Texas A&M University that talked about copper deficiency in goats. And I was like, and I called him and talked to him, and I'm like, yeah, I think that this is the problem, and my goats are not getting enough copper. So when a goat died, I called this one vet and I said, I want to have her liver tested to see if she's copper deficient. And he said, oh, you're wasting your money. Goats can't be copper deficient. And I said, this is so out of character for me. I literally said, well, it's my money. And so he sent in the liver, got it tested, and her copper level was supposed to be between 25 and 150, and it was 4.
Oh my
Mm.
Like
goodness.
4. Like, she was so horrendously deficient. Like, I don't even understand how she survived as long as she did. And they all had these outward signs of copper deficiency, like their coats were faded and they were losing hair around their eyes and losing hair on the tip of their tail, which are unique to copper deficiency. And so anyway, I wound up supplementing all of my goats with copper. The next fall, everybody got pregnant. They took their pregnancies to term. They gave birth to healthy animals, which that was a thing too. Like, even if they got pregnant, they were aborting or giving birth to like tiny little toothpick kids too small to survive.
Mhm.
And it was all because they were so copper deficient. And so that was by the time, and I say, and then also the other thing too, the other emerging research at the time was on worms in goats. It was very weird. Like if you find stuff published in the 90s, people very much thought that like goats, in terms of like nutrition and parasites and stuff like that, they were just like sheep, which is kind of crazy to me. They had not done nutritional research on goats prior to like 20 years ago. They hadn't done worm research specifically on goats until 20 years ago. And it's crazy because goats and sheep don't even have the same number of chromosomes. Um, like why would
What?
anybody think that they were this they would have the same nutritional needs, need the same dosage of drugs? Like goats, for most dewormers, goats need twice the dosage that sheep do. And so, and this was all the research that was just being done like 20 years ago. And I was finding it. And so I contacted more researchers. And by the time I had enough information to keep my goats alive, I literally had enough information to write a 300-page book
Oh gosh.
about how to raise goats.
And then you wrote a 300-page book.
Yeah, I did. And funny enough, when you write a 300-page book, the world starts to see you as an expert on that topic.
Who'd have thought?
Weird.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just crazy. And like I even look in that book sometimes for stuff. I'm like, you know what? I remember writing about that. And I tell people, I'm like, do you remember everything you ever wrote in a term paper? Well, this was a 300-page term paper. Okay. So I have to look up answers sometimes because it's a lot, you know.
It is a
And
lot.
I have even more now because like we're over 150 podcast episodes where I've interviewed vet researchers and vet professors and stuff, and all of the other articles on my website, and
That's amazing. And I've heard your story a couple of times. Because you told me, and then we had a crew, and I've heard your story a couple of times, and I just now put together the connection of like you got into becoming a farmer because of nutrition, and then here the next phase was actually your nutrition for goats. So first nutrition for your family, and then for your other kids. Sorry, see what I did there? That's my first goat joke. Anyway, so that's so cool though, of the how that I don't have a next connecting thought, but cool.
I also love that you were just really persistent in your problem solving. I think that there's so many times and so many opportunities where somebody says, well, that's not possible. Well, goats can't be, copper deficient. And we go, well, I guess that's it. Then I guess I just get to live with this unknown problem and I can't figure it out. And we kind of throw our hands up. And you were like, no, I'm going to find this problem. I'm not just going to read the research. I'm going to call the researcher. I'm going to like reach out to them and ask questions and tell them my story, see if they have insight. And I think that I don't know, it just feels much more unique in this time. And I feel like we all could take a little more of that energy and be a little better at advocating for ourselves.
They also, I'm curious, the researchers, when you called them, I would imagine that they were like, oh my gosh, I'm so happy to talk to somebody that's in practice doing this, because I'm, in a lab and I can come for a little bit. But were they super receptive and very excited with all the information that you were sharing?
Oh yeah.
I'm assuming you shared it back and forth.
Yeah. It's not like they've got people calling them all the time saying, hey, talk to me about your research on goats and copper and or worms or whatever,
Their calendar's not full of people wanting an autograph, eh?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they're all super busy people because they're professors and researchers and stuff like that. But it's like me, like you get me started talking about goats and I love it. Like it's my passion. And so most of them are doing the research because that's their passion,
Mm-hmm.
and so they love talking about it, and they can go on and on about it, just like I can go on and on about all things goats.
I love it.
I love it.
Well, so Deborah, if you were to give advice to somebody else who maybe has this passion or this draw to go do something crazy, like what would you tell them? How would you encourage them?
Do it. Like, people, tell me all, people have told me so many times, like, oh, that's not possible, or you can't do that, or whatever. Um, and I always think about, like, well, you know what? If somebody asked me if it's possible to run a marathon, I'd be like, no, I can't do that. Like, that's impossible. I can't even run a mile. Like, I'd pass out, Um, but that's because I don't know how to do it. That's not my field of expertise,
Yeah.
So a lot of times, if somebody tells you something's impossible, ask yourself, what do they actually know about that? You know, because so many people told me that it wasn't going to be possible to do what we want to do moving to the country. They're like, well, how do you know what to do? Like, what if the animals die? And it's like, well, these are people who've spent their whole life in the city. They know even less than I do. I had at least read a couple of books
Right.
at that point. But ask yourself, like, if somebody tells you it's impossible, ask yourself if that person's really qualified to give you advice on that topic. One of the things, like, in my business that drives me crazy, I really don't like talking about the business end of my business to most people, because everybody thinks they're an expert on, like, social media, because, well, they're like, well, I'm on Facebook, so of course I know all about it. And it's like, for those of you who do business on Facebook, you know that Business Suite is a whole different universe.
It is 100%.
Yeah, like, it's not the same place.
No, and what's driving me crazy these days is explaining, our day job is marketing agency. And so I'll have to explain, no, your business portfolio is different than your business page, is different than your business assets, is different than the business suite. And they're like, but why? And I'm like, I am not Meta. I'm so sorry. I'm just here to translate. I'm not here to tell you that it's a good system. I'm just telling you this is the system we live in. And then somebody's like, well, just make a Facebook post or just like run that little ad. Like, just do an ad and you'll get like 1,000 people to come to the thing. And it's like, sure. Yeah, if you say so, if you know that, then why don't you go try it and see what you can make happen?
Yeah.
But then, you know what? Go try it and see what you can make happen. On the other side,
Yeah.
why not?
Yeah, because there are things that I'm like, I would say my kind of caveat to a lot of things is I will talk to people that are, oh, I'm starting a business, or, oh, I don't know if I can sell this thing or whatever. And I go, well, if somebody agrees to give you money and to provide a service, are you willing to do what it takes to make sure you deliver on the promise that you made? Even if you think it's going to cost you 2 hours and it cost you 5 hours, are you willing to invest the 5 hours to make sure that your promise is good? And they're like, well, of course, I would never take somebody's money and then not I'm like, then you're fine. You will probably learn some hard lessons. You will probably undersell yourself when you start, or you will try to oversell yourself, and the market will tell you that is not actually a thing. And, or whatever. There were lots of things. I remember early on, I had a client that I was like, well, I mean, this thing took 10 hours. And he goes, well, it might have taken you 10 hours, but it shouldn't have taken you 10 hours. And I'm not willing to pay for you to learn that it wasn't supposed to take you 10 hours. It should have taken 2 hours. And I'm willing to pay you 2 hours. And it was a very interesting lesson, because then I'm like, oh, well, then why did it take us 10 hours? And so I always questioned after that. And I figured out that you can't, just because it took you 10 hours, you don't always get to, that's not what the market is willing to bear. But if I'm willing, as long as I have faith in my willingness and ability to work hard, I will tell people I will do the thing. I may be late. I may not deliver it exactly when I thought I could. I may run into, like, I thought I could quickly run this ad, and it turns out you don't have your business suite, and it turns out you don't have, and there may be things that I have to go back and adjust those expectations. But at the end of the day, I'm going to do whatever I can do. And I think I've given people money back and been like, I don't know, sorry. I don't know what to tell you. It turns out I can't actually do that thing that I thought that I could do. And so here you go. So being afraid, do it scared. Would you say do it scared? Yeah. Do it when you don't know. You don't have to know how, because you also, I think the other thing is just trusting in your ability to figure it out. Like, oh, okay, I'm going to work hard and I'm going to figure it out. And I'm going to try 17 different ways that don't work and then figure out the one that did.
Yeah,
Angela,
exactly.
I also think about, you've told me before, early on in your business days when you were 26 and you bought a business, and you talked about you were too young and dumb to know that you were like shouldn't have signed $100,000 contract with the police department. Like, you're
Right.
like, why not? Like, yeah, that
Yeah.
sounds great. That'll pay, all these things. I'll totally figure it out. Then it was like, what in the world? There's a reason that other people weren't touching the contract. And I don't know.
Totally. There's so many things. It's really interesting. I would say the disadvantage of experience
Mhm.
is now I know, and I am more reluctant to take risks like that because I'll just be like, oh. And the reputational risk is bigger because I now do have a brand and I have a reputation. And so I have to be cautious about the experiments that I run. And I've lost a lot of money trying things that didn't work. And we've talked about it on the podcast about me not bringing too much of that. But there are things that I did at 26, 27, 29 that I would like. That would be if Sammy came to me and said, I think we should do this thing, I would be like, no, absolutely not. Recently we had a partner that said, hey, will you write this kind of software? And I said, yep, $1 million. And he said, come on, be real. I go, oh, I'm sorry, you're right. $965,998. And he goes, you're being ridiculous. And then, so that's what I've been saying for years. I say the same number all the time. Anyway, and so then recently I was like, oh, hey, we could just do this thing. And Barry's like, you told him it would cost $900,000. And now you're willing to do it yourself. And I'm like, well, oh yeah, you're right. Maybe we shouldn't do that thing. Anyway, so don't also think, oh, I need to have more experience, because that could also be to your disadvantage.
I love that. Angela, did you have any other questions?
No, I was just going to ask Deborah where people can find her.
Oh, yeah. Go for it.
Well, my main website is thriftyhomesteader.com, which is where like all the things, because I started out as just a general homestead blogger and writer. And then my podcast is For the Love of Goats, and it's on all the podcast players and YouTube. And so those are the main places. And you can find all the other connections like on
all the socials.
All the socials, yeah.
All the places.
For the Love of Goats. I love it.
Yeah, that's it.
Well, and I am surprised I didn't actually bring this up sooner, but goats are my number one favorite animal on the planet. So I just love it. I also have a deep love of goats. I don't know that I could have one, but I love to admire them. We'll see, maybe one day. Yeah. Maybe I'll have to move out of the suburbs, though. Pretty sure my POA has some rules against it. But we'll get there.
Sammy, as part of the promo for this, we should definitely find the 17 different pictures we have of you and baby goats. I'm telling you, we have a bunch.
Oh my gosh. No, wait, real fast. This is like the PS story. What is it? Grant Farms in St. Louis has a little like baby goat feeding thing. I don't know. It's like a petting zoo, but you don't just pet the goats. You get to like feed the baby goats. And when I was a teenager, we went and I just loved it. It was just like the best day ever. And I'm like sitting on the ground in this pen and I just have goats all around me. And there's this very adorable picture that I think for the longest time was like my Facebook cover photo or picture, profile picture, my whole teenage life. And then this past spring break, I got to take my young boys back to the same place and got to have them feed the baby goats at Grant's farm. And I was like, okay, I got to recreate the picture. Like here I was sitting against this fence and like now I've got my kids and these kids, like all the kids surrounding me. And it was just a great moment. And I was like, I love it. So I'll share both the 16-year-old me and the 30-year-old me with all the goats around me being like, of course we had to talk about goats. So I think that also added to my like, oh my gosh, a goat podcast. I love it. I'm so excited. We're all just really deeply connected in the most interesting ways.
Yeah. I hear a lot of people love goats. So
yeah.
Great.
It's awesome.
I love telling people that my podcast is about goats because they're always like, did you say goats? Oh my God, I love goats.
Yeah, we tell people, be like, our podcast is about living intentionally and wrestling with grief and how do you process your feelings. They're like, oh, okay. You either get that like, I might check it out sometime or not. Or someone's like, oh, I need that. So anyway, you guys listening are the ones probably who are in that second category. So Hope you guys have enjoyed this nice little PS at our episode. Until next time, we hope you guys go and be freaking awesome.